Welcome back to the Sustainability Forum 2020. After this short break, I hope you had the chance to network with your peers, and you have the chance also to do that in a longer break after just 3 presentations. Our next speaker is coming from, he's a Greek, but he lives in Cambridge, UK. He's a distinguished member of our board of directors, Aris Vrettos. Aris leads the Center for Business Transformation at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. And he's going to talk about sustainable business transformation. Aris, can you hear us?
Hi, Michael. I can hear you very well. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, so as participants. Aris, the digital floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. And it's always a privilege to be with you and to be part of the forum again this year. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time in advance. It's a real privilege and honor to be able to spend the next half hour or so with you. Michael has asked me to say a few words about some of the work that we are doing at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership and the new center that we've set up, the Center for Business Transformation. Traditionally, we have not really integrated organizational change, digital change, business transformation, and all those modern structures and processes with sustainability. But it's becoming increasingly clear that it is very, very difficult to steer an organization towards ambitious visions, targets, and outcomes without, at a minimum, tweaking, ideally completely revisiting some of the big organizational elements that dictate and guide and for the most part define how a company creates value, how it allocates value, how it serves the interest of different stakeholders. So in the short time that I have today, I want to introduce you a little bit to the work that we've been doing. Just to flag that we're still in early stages. There are some things that we know, some things that are proven, some things that are given. Science has been an ally in understanding where we need to get to, but as also working through the academic literature, the methodologies and the practices, there's a lot of things that we're now starting to explore. And it's a fascinating journey, but perhaps we may have more questions than answers at this stage. So with that, I'll try and share my screen, given the guidance that I received in the test call the other day. I'll start with some of you may remember this. This is a sustainability framework that I used to work with a big company a few years ago. And it was a very simple framework. It had 3 lines, 3 elements: make money, make it ethically, and make a difference. And it was a great approach to sustainability, or citizenship, as the company called it at the time. But this is a framework from 15 years ago with General Electric. And I share this because it is no longer what we need. It was great at the time. It was very powerful for the specific organization, but it is no longer what we need. And the reason for that, of course, is what we know now and what we're experiencing first with regards to climate change, which is having and is about to have a transformative impact on the lives of everyone on the planet. The second is the impact on the loss of nature and the loss of the ecosystem services that have been providing us with a number of invaluable services, many of which are now coming under threat. From water and soil and health services, food, all kinds of amazing things that nature has taken millions of years and has been providing us for free. Now, because of human impact, the impact on land and deforestation, the extinction of species and so on, are shrinking and shrinking. And the third one which is, if you like, the sustainability challenge of the 2010s, is the rise of inequality and how polarization, extreme gaps emerging between the poor, both between countries but within countries, are undermining the very social fabric and the stability in which the economy and society rely on. And to address those, or some of those elements, we have identified some very ambitious areas and targets. So we want to decarbonize the economy to address climate change. We have to protect and restore nature, and we have to build more inclusive and resilient societies. For climate and for nature in particular, we are able to set some very ambitious targets. So on climate change, we have to halve global emissions, CO2 emissions equivalent by 2030, and be on track for net zero economies by 2050. A very ambitious goal. And just to put that into perspective, the drop in global emissions that we had to experience, unfortunately, because of the impact of COVID-19, which was about roughly around 10%, that is pretty much the drop in global emissions we have to find to have our emissions, our carbon footprint by 2030. So you already see we're talking about big and very difficult changes. The same with protecting and restoring nature, and then rapidly close the inequality gap. At the same time, we see that the role of business and the expectations of business in society is changing. This is some data from the Edelman Trust Barometer, basically highlighting what many of us have seen in recent years, the expectation that companies, in this case brands, must have a role in addressing some of the key problems that society is facing. And then consumers and citizens have a way of making companies or guiding companies to those decisions. You will have seen, this is just to flag another example of how the changing operating context of business is emerging. You will have seen the news a few months ago about Rio Tinto blowing up the caves, 40,000-year-old caves, with some of the early human writings and signs of civilization in Australia. And you will probably also have followed what happened. In June, the incident happened. The company's leadership said sorry. A month and a half later, the senior leadership team had to give away its bonus. And then very quickly afterwards, the CEO and senior executives had to resign, all in a space of 3 months. So trying to do what we might call a little bit of better is no longer enough, and expectations in society are changing. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact of something which is very important. First, business is at the center of this effort, the transition to decarbonize the economy, protect and restore nature, and foster more inclusive and resilient societies. And we simply cannot do this without business. The changes that are necessary, the challenges that we face, and the combination of modern economy are such that we cannot do it without business action and leadership. So the question is business ready to deliver? So with Michael's consultation, I'm going to put to you 3 main questions. The first is, what does a commercially viable company whose practices and strategies and business models help deliver sustainability by 2030 look? So what does a sustainable business look like? The first thing to say is that it doesn't look like the business of today. It doesn't look like the organization that invests, in some cases rightfully so, but predominantly invest in sustainability through CSR, or even corporate and creating shared value, and then uses, this is a red alert for many of us working in sustainability. As we're looking at what a sustainable business looks like, it's something that it's an organization that looks a little bit different than today, starting with how we perceive the contribution that we make to sustainability. And I think many of the tenants that we see within the CSR, if you like, level of business, which is something that has made a big difference for a number of years. But in our perspective, it's something that it's time to leave to one side, not abandon it, but continue doing it, and then evolve what we think about organizational excellence and business success, and how integrated climate, nature, and social issues need to be in the company's core business model, its strategy, its way it's making decision. So slide 9 has some of the examples that many of you will have started seeing these days. We see energy companies, cement companies, retailers, every single sector making those types of commitments. For example, to become carbon neutral, as is the case with Iberdrola in this image by 2050, or to Microsoft announced recently that it wants to become carbon negative, so to take out all the carbon that the company has emitted in its history by 2050 and be carbon, if you like, net positive, and in a short period of time. And that, of course, as you can imagine, will take some big changes in the way the companies develops its program, its products and its services, but also what kind of solutions it provides. And the third example you will have seen is IKEA. Again, people and planet positive, not just minimizing the impact and working to mitigate that, but actually make a net positive contribution in society. And you see some of the big ambitions these large organizations have. So when we think about what a sustainable business looks like, we've identified, looking at the literature, talking with stakeholders and looking at leading practice, we've identified 4 key areas that support a resilient business. The first one is, as you might expect, zero carbon. A company that's on a path to be net zero compatible by 2030 and 2050, and ideally net zero enabling. And the second component is nature positive, a company that helps protect and restore nature, mainly in its supply chain practices, but in its other operating practices as well. And it covers issues from land, deforestation, water, soil, all the natural resources of the company it's responsible for. The third component is a company that is circular, that has moved away from this extract, make, throwaway model, and is reusing resources.
Aris, can you please stop sharing your screen?
Is that okay?
Yep.
All right, thank you. And then finally, a business that is inclusive, a business that is understanding, has made the case, and is exploring what it means to make a big difference toward helping closing the inequality gap. And those are some very difficult decisions. It includes pay differential. It includes confronting some of the inequities when it comes to race, when it comes to gender, but also when it comes to wealth and income across society. And there are some very complex issues relating here. So moving to slide 11 then, the question becomes, how aligned then is the business with all those goals, with such a framework? How aligned is the model, the purpose, the culture, and the governance with a sustainable business? So if we move to slide 12, again, one of the core tenets of a sustainable business is the move from shareholder focus towards stakeholder focus. And that was academic and conceptual a few years ago. It's become very real these days. And there are in fact many examples of organizations that are starting to make the shift. But increasingly society is starting to reject the traditional focus on capitalism and profit maximization. Indeed, if you speak to people between the age of 16 and 22, 24, they will have very strong views against profit maximization and capitalism. Now, I'm not saying we abandon that, but a very significant reconfiguration is required. Slide 13. If you don't mind, I'll read this out from a quote from two business management economists at the Harvard University. And they said earlier this year, public companies continue to be organized as for-profit organizations whose principal objective remains to create wealth for shareholders. Almost every move, strategy, tactic, or intervention is evaluated based on its impact on revenues or profits using metrics such as efficiency, return on capital, payback period, asset turnover, and margins. CEOs continue to be hired, fired, and compensated based on metrics such as revenues, profits, and share prices. And the board of directors continue to be selected by shareholders to protect their interests. So basically, outlining the trap that today's companies are in and how challenging it is for those even at the helm of the organizations to break away from those decisions. Slide 14, and this is some of the work that we are doing at the moment. We've tried to understand why is that the case, and it's very clear that this business as usual, let's call it abroad, is very much ingrained in business purpose and definitions and measures of success because we've developed it over the last 40 or 50 years. All these notions of culture and governance and management theories developed at the same time with neoclassical or neoliberal capitalism, the Milton Friedman view, if you like. And at that time, the view was we will solve society's problems, we will create value in society by businesses generating profit, by governments regulating. And that. So now we see that long-term well-being, sustainability, and the big issues, all these things are under significant threat. And all those responses that we call still business as usual, corporate social responsibility, creating shared value, and I'm very happy to talk about why those are still business as usual responses and so on, are inadequate. And what we're starting to think about is that we need purpose-driven companies to deliver a sustainable economy and a resilient society. Slide 15 has just two examples, just to illustrate that companies are indeed starting to move toward that purpose. One example is the NatWest Group, which as a banking group here in the UK, many of you will remember that it went into significant difficulties with the financial crisis, and that prompted the organization to rethink what its purpose is. And what I like about this is that the bank is on a journey. They're not claiming they've won anything yet. They're on a journey, they put a framework, they put a lot of work to build a more sustainable bank, stronger governance, and stronger policies. And with this approach, they want to create a more sustainable value for a wider range of stakeholder groups. As I said, they're on a journey, but there are many companies like this that are having to revisit and redefine their purpose in order to better serve the interests of their stakeholders, including their customers, their suppliers, their shareholders, and so on. And the second example is, many of you will know Danone, who's become a certified B Corporation. I think Global Sustain is also a B Corp, by the way. And 45% of the company's revenue or the businesses are now certified as a B Corp. Many of you will know what B Corps are, but it means adhering to very, very ambitious governance, ethical, environmental, social, and so on standards. So we see that shift at the moment. So slide 16, the second step that organizations need to take is to assess where they are in their systems, their current positions, and what those tools for their progress towards becoming a sustainable business are necessary, what's needed. And these are very, very complicated, difficult sometimes, but very open and liberating types of conversations and processes. the final question to explore, slide 17. How then, having identified what the sustainable version of a company is, reviewed how well set up the organization is to get there, how does the company do it? What are the organizational changes and practices that will enable the business to transform? And we talk about transformation because of the urgency. If we had decades and decades to make that change, we would simply be talking about change. But because we only have a short period of time to address these challenges and the level of change required, that's why we're talking about transformation. Slide 18 highlights one of the examples that many of you will know very well. This is Orsted, who 10 years ago, still operating under Danish oil and gas, mostly oil and gas and coal, took the decision to transition to a renewable company. And they are one of the cases, the few cases of companies who have completely made this transformation journey, showed that it is possible, it is interesting, and it is very, very profitable at the same time. The company is now a world leader. If you look at a graph at its share price since this transition, while the other European utilities, RWE and Neon and so on, who stayed invested in coal, had to write off billions and billions and billions of assets. Companies like Orsted have been going the other way. So it's a great example of how those transformations occur. The second point I want to make about transformation is that there's some difficult problems and there are some difficult questions. It's not even at the basic level. Should we use recycled material? What is more environmentally benign, or what it has the best environmental footprint? Using virgin material or using recycled material? Reusing some of the processes that we have and investing the whole organization toward them, or creating things new? There are some challenging questions that not everyone has worked out. And here at the center, we work a lot with the startup community in the Cambridge cluster, in the SME community. And this is just an illustration of the community that we've built together with our network, the businesses, the investors, the entrepreneurs, and so on. It requires collaboration. It requires people coming together and thinking, what are the solutions that we as a business are expected and can deliver based on the skills and the assets and the networks that we have to contribute to some of those problems. I emphasize, it's not about mitigating the impacts that the company has only in society and the environment. It's making a contribution to solving and addressing and coming up with products and services that help customers, suppliers, and others in a profitable way, of course, to solve their own and address their own challenges and issues. So that is the third step that we're looking at. Starting defining the sustainable business and its role in society, assessing the current position, and then finding ways to enable the business to transform itself and the system. It's a long journey for any organization. It starts with evaluating where the company needs to go and how it gets there, but then it takes years and years and years. Orsted's example is a wonderful one. It took the company a decade to get from what it was to what it has become, and it's now moving toward the direction, and it's by 2025 that the company will have met all its goals. So thank you very much for your time. That's the end of the presentation from me. I apologize for the technical difficulties.
No, Aris, it's us. Aris, can you hear me?
I can hear you well, Michael. Yes.
Yeah, it's us. We should apologize to our participants, and I would like you, please, for us, the two of us together, to make a promise that over the next days, we're going to deliver one specialized presentation with you for our participants, and instead of 30 minutes, we'll give you a full hour so that you can address the issues. Are you in agreement with that?
I can't say no now that you've put me on the spot, Michael. So yes, Happy
All
to
right.
do that.
Again, apologies from the participants about this technical issue with Aris' presentation. Aris' presentation will be in the e-bag that is going to be distributed to you. And this is a promise that over the next days, we're going to organize a webinar, 1 hour webinar with Aris for all the forum participants.